There was a period in UFC history when Conor McGregor felt less like a fighter and more like a phenomenon. Every time he walked into the Octagon, there was a strange sense that the ending had already been written. Fans felt it. Commentators felt it. Even his opponents seemed to feel it. He wasn't simply winning fights, he was predicting them, announcing them to the world, and then making them happen in front of millions of people. That level of confidence alone would have made him fascinating. But what truly made him terrifying was that his predictions kept coming true. While other fighters hoped their game plans would work, McGregor carried himself like a man who had already seen the future. And for several years, it genuinely looked like he had. Most people remember the knockouts. They remember the left hand, the celebrations, the press conferences, and the viral moments that turned him into a global superstar. But if you look deeper, beyond the highlight reels, you'll discover something far more impressive. Prime Conor McGregor wasn't just powerful. He was incredibly intelligent inside the cage. Every movement served a purpose. Every feint was a question designed to force an answer. Every step manipulated distance. Every exchange gathered information. He wasn't fighting randomly. He was building a puzzle in real time, and by the time his opponents realized what was happening, they were already trapped inside it. What separated McGregor from many knockout artists was that he rarely relied on brute force alone. Plenty of fighters hit hard. Plenty of fighters possess explosive power, but very few understand how to consistently create the perfect conditions for that power to succeed. McGregor understood that the knockout punch is often thrown minutes before it actually lands. The setup begins long before the finish. He would spend entire rounds collecting reactions, identifying habits, exposing weaknesses, and subtly conditioning opponents to expect one thing before giving them something completely different. To casual viewers, the finish looked sudden. To McGregor, it was simply the conclusion of a process that had been unfolding since the opening seconds. Perhaps the most frightening aspect of his prime was how calm he looked while doing it. There was no panic, no hesitation, no wasted motion. He moved through fights with a level of confidence that bordered on arrogance, yet somehow he kept backing it up. Opponents often entered the cage determined to silence him, but that emotional energy frequently worked against them. The more aggressive they became, the more opportunities they gave him. The angrier they got, the more predictable they became. McGregor thrived in chaos because he understood it better than the people creating it. He wanted reactions. He wanted mistakes. He wanted opponents to abandon discipline. And when they did, the consequences were usually immediate. For a brief stretch of time, it felt like nobody had an answer. Featherweights couldn't stop him. Lightweights couldn't stop him. Veterans couldn't stop him. Champions couldn't stop him. Every fight seemed to follow a similar script. The opponent would start confidently, believing they had discovered a weakness. Then McGregor would begin reading patterns. The openings would appear. The timing would sharpen. The pressure would build. And eventually the moment would come. One clean shot. One devastating counter. One perfectly timed sequence. Suddenly, another contender was staring at the lights while McGregor celebrated in the center of the cage. What makes this story even more fascinating is that his success wasn't built on a single skill. People often reduce his greatness to the famous left hand, but that explanation barely scratches the surface. The left hand was the weapon, but the real genius was everything that allowed him to use it. His footwork, his timing, his understanding of distance, his ability to control the pace of a fight, his psychological warfare, his talent for making elite athletes doubt themselves. All of those elements worked together to create a fighter who felt almost impossible to solve during his peak years. And that's why, years later, fans still debate just how good prime Conor McGregor really was. Because when you go back and study those performances carefully, you begin to realize that the knockouts were only the visible part of the story. Underneath them was a fighter operating at an incredibly high level of strategic awareness. A fighter who could process information at extraordinary speed. A fighter who seemed to know exactly what his opponents wanted to do before they did it themselves. July 12, 2021. Just 2 days after Conor McGregor suffered one of the most devastating injuries of his career, Khabib Nurmagomedov made a statement that would eventually become one of the most debated predictions in modern MMA history. At the time, most fans dismissed it immediately. Some called it bitterness. Others called it jealousy. After all, Khabib and McGregor had one of the most intense rivalries the sport had ever seen. It was easy to assume the former lightweight champion was simply taking another shot at his old rival. But as the years passed, something strange happened. The prediction refused to die. In fact, every year that passed seemed to make it more relevant. To understand why those words carried so much weight, you first need to understand who Conor McGregor was at his peak. Not just a champion. Not just a superstar. He was arguably the most transformative figure combat sports had ever produced. Before McGregor, UFC stars existed. After McGregor, global superstars existed. He arrived in the promotion in 2013 carrying little more than confidence and ambition. Within 3 years, he had become the first fighter in UFC history to simultaneously hold titles in 2 different weight classes. That achievement alone would have secured his legacy forever. The rise felt almost unreal. Every fight generated more attention than the last. Every knockout created another viral moment. Every press conference became must-see entertainment. Fans weren't simply watching his fights. They were watching an entire spectacle. He transformed fight promotion into an art form and somehow managed to back up every outrageous claim with performances inside the cage. That combination had never existed before. Plenty of fighters were entertaining. Plenty of fighters were talented. Very few were both at the same level. Then came the Jose Aldo fight. A champion many considered untouchable. A fighter who had ruled the featherweight division for years and seemed destined to continue doing so. Yet McGregor knocked him out in 13 seconds. One punch changed everything. The moment instantly became one of the most iconic highlights in UFC history. It wasn't just a victory. It was a statement. McGregor wasn't following the traditional path of greatness. He was rewriting the rules entirely. The momentum continued through the Nate Diaz rivalry, one of the most profitable and entertaining rivalries the sport had ever seen. Then came the Floyd Mayweather boxing match. Suddenly McGregor wasn't just an MMA star anymore. He had become a global celebrity. People who had never watched a UFC event knew exactly who he was. He appeared on magazine covers. Television shows wanted interviews. Corporations wanted partnerships. Money flowed from every direction imaginable. His whiskey company became a massive commercial success. His social media following exploded. He was no longer simply a fighter. He was a business empire. And while that sounds like the ultimate success story, it also introduced a challenge that many athletes throughout history have struggled to overcome. The bigger the brand becomes, the harder it is to maintain the obsession that originally created it. When McGregor faced Khabib Nurmagomedov in 2018, the event felt larger than sport itself. The rivalry had become intensely personal. Months of insults, confrontations, and controversy had transformed the fight into a global spectacle. Millions watched. Expectations reached unprecedented levels. But when the cage door closed, none of that mattered. Hype doesn't win fights. Fame doesn't win fights. Preparation wins fights. And that's where Khabib believed the difference existed. Inside the cage, Khabib experienced something that nobody else could fully understand. He wasn't watching McGregor from outside. He wasn't judging him through interviews or social media. He was fighting him directly. He felt his timing. He felt his reactions. He felt his resistance. And afterward, Khabib suggested that the fighter standing across from him wasn't the same athlete who had conquered 2 divisions years earlier. Many fans ignored that assessment because they didn't want to believe it. The idea that Conor McGregor could already be declining seemed impossible. He was still young. He was still famous. He was still capable of generating massive attention. Surely one loss couldn't change everything. Then came Donald Cerrone in January of 2020. The fight lasted 40 seconds. The knockout was spectacular. Immediately, the comeback narrative exploded back to life. The old Conor is back. The champion is returning. Another title run is coming. Those headlines appeared everywhere. But looking back, it's worth asking a simple question. What exactly did that victory prove? Cerrone was a respected veteran, but he had already lost several recent fights and was clearly no longer operating at the level he once had. Yet because the finish was so explosive, people saw what they wanted to see. They saw confirmation that the superstar remained untouched. Khabib remained unconvinced. Then Dustin Poirier entered the picture again. The rematch carried enormous significance because their first fight had happened during McGregor's rise. Many expected history to repeat itself. Instead, Poirier delivered one of the biggest victories of his career. McGregor had moments of success early, but something felt different. His movement wasn't quite as fluid. His reactions weren't quite as sharp. His ability to absorb punishment didn't appear as reliable. When momentum shifted, he couldn't regain control the way he once had. The loss shocked many fans, but the narrative survived. Supporters argued that adjustments would be made. They pointed toward the trilogy fight. They insisted that a fully prepared McGregor would return stronger than ever. Hope remained alive because people wanted to believe the story wasn't finished. Then July 10, 2021 arrived. The trilogy against Poirier ended in disaster. Near the end of the opening round, McGregor suffered a horrific leg injury that immediately stopped the fight. One moment he was competing in one of the biggest events of the year. The next, he was lying on the canvas with a broken leg. It was a shocking image that instantly became part of UFC history. 2 days later came Khabib's statement. He acknowledged McGregor's accomplishments. He acknowledged his age. But he expressed serious doubt that the former champion would ever return to the top of the sport. Most fans rejected the idea instantly. How could someone as talented and accomplished as Conor McGregor possibly be finished? Because combat sports don't care about what you achieved yesterday. They only care about what you can do today. Years passed. Comeback announcements came and went. Rumored opponents appeared and disappeared. Fight dates were discussed, postponed, and canceled. The comeback never materialized. Meanwhile, the lightweight division continued moving forward. New contenders emerged. New champions were crowned. New rivalries captured the attention of fans. The sport kept evolving while McGregor remained on the sidelines. Yet despite not fighting, he remained one of the biggest names in MMA. And that's exactly what Khabib was talking about. The fighter and the brand had become two different things. The brand remained incredibly powerful. The fighter became increasingly uncertain. McGregor could still generate headlines. He could still dominate social media discussions. He could still attract attention with a single post. But generating attention and winning championship fights are not the same thing. One requires fame. The other requires relentless discipline. Khabib understood that distinction better than almost anyone. His own career serves as the perfect example. When he retired undefeated, many fans wanted him to continue. There were still major fights available. There was still money to be made. There were still records to chase. But he chose to leave. Not because he couldn't compete anymore. Because he understood the value of leaving on his own terms. That level of self-awareness is extremely rare. Most fighters don't get to choose their ending. The sport chooses it for them. Many stay too long. Many continue chasing a version of themselves that no longer exists. Many spend years trying to recreate moments that can never be recreated. Combat sports history is filled with legends who learned that lesson the hard way. Perhaps that's why Khabib's comments continue to resonate years later. They weren't emotional. They weren't dramatic. They weren't designed to create headlines. They were simply observations from someone who had experienced McGregor firsthand and recognized something the rest of the world wasn't ready to accept. Today, Conor McGregor remains one of the most influential figures in combat sports history. His achievements are undeniable. His impact on the UFC is permanent. He changed the business forever and inspired an entire generation of athletes. Nothing can erase that legacy. But the question was never whether Conor McGregor was great. The question was whether the fighter who achieved that greatness still existed. According to Khabib Nurmagomedov, the answer was already clear years ago. And perhaps that's why he never felt the need to say anything else. If you enjoyed this video and want more deep dives into the biggest stories, rivalries, and hidden truths in MMA history, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and let me know in the comments which fighter or story you want to see next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.